The rain in New York City doesn't wash away sins. It just makes the blood harder to see. Elena thought she was just saving a helpless child collapsing on a slick sidewalk outside a diner on 47th Street. She didn't know the boy was the only weakness of Dante Moretti, the capo of the East Coast. She didn't know that by checking a pulse, she was signing a contract with the devil himself. In a world where mercy is a liability, a waitress with empty pockets and a nursing degree was about to teach a ruthless killer that the most dangerous weapon of all isn't a gun, it's love. The storm had turned Hell's Kitchen into a blur of grey sleet and neon reflections. It was one of those November nights where the wind felt personal, cutting through coats and rattling the windows of Sal's diner. Elena wiped down the counter, her hands red and chapped from the bleach water. The clock above the pie display read 11:15 p.m. Her shift had ended 15 minutes ago, but saw the owner was short-staffed again, and Elena needed the overtime. She needed every cent. Her tuition for the final semester of nursing school at NYU was due in 3 weeks, and her bank account was hovering dangerously close to double digits. "Go home, kid," Sal grunted, slapping a wet rag onto the pass-through window. "You look like a ghost." "I'm fine, Sal. Just closing out the register." Elena lied, forcing a tired smile. She wasn't fine. She was exhausted, hungry, and terrified of the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen table. She clocked out, wrapped her thin wool coat tighter around her body, and pushed open the glass door. The wind immediately assaulted her, whipping her dark hair across her face. She lowered her head, clutching her bag, and hurried toward the subway station. The street was mostly deserted. Smart people were inside, but as she passed the mouth of a narrow alleyway near 9th Avenue, she saw something that made her stop dead in her tracks. A small figure was huddled against a dumpster soaked to the bone. Elena squinted through the driving rain. It was a boy no older than 7. He was wearing a tuxedo jacket that was far too big for him and expensive dress shoes that were ruined by the mud. He wasn't moving. "Hey!" Elena shouted over the roar of the thunder. She ran toward him, splashing through a puddle. "Hey, are you okay?" The boy didn't answer. As she got closer, she saw his chest hitching violently. He was gasping, his mouth open like a fish out of water, but no air was getting in. His lips were turning a terrifying shade of blue. Instinct took over. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by the sharp, adrenaline-fueled focus of her medical training. Elena dropped to her knees in the freezing mud. "Can you hear me?" she asked, grabbing his shoulders. He was burning up, yet shivering violently. The boy's eyes rolled back in his head. He clutched his throat. Asthma attack. Or anaphylaxis. "Okay, listen to me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm going to help you." She quickly checked his pockets for an inhaler. Nothing. His breathing was becoming a high-pitched wheeze stridor. His airway was closing. "Stay with me," she commanded. She ripped open her bag. She didn't have an EpiPen, but she had a heavy textbook and a water bottle. Useless. She looked around frantically. The street was empty. She pulled the boy into her lap to keep him upright, tilting his chin to open the airway as best she could. "Breathe. Come on, breathe." Suddenly, tires screeched against the wet asphalt. The sound was so loud it tore through the storm. Eleanor looked up, blinded by high beams. 3 black Cadillac Escalades swerved across the double yellow lines, mounting the curb and boxing her in. Before she could even scream, the doors flew open. Men in dark suits poured out, moving with military precision. They held umbrellas, but they weren't looking at the rain. They were looking at the perimeter. Then the rear door of the middle car opened. A man stepped out. He didn't run. He stalked. He was tall, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than Eleanor's entire life earnings. The rain soaked him instantly, plastering his dark hair to his forehead, but he didn't seem to notice. His face was a mask of terrifying fury, carved from granite. Leo. The name was torn from his throat, raw and guttural. He saw Eleanor holding the boy. For a split second, Eleanor thought he was going to kill her. His hand went to his waistband, revealing the glint of a silver pistol. "Don't shoot," Elena screamed, shielding the boy's body with her own. "He can't breathe. He's going into respiratory arrest." The man froze. He looked at the boy's blue lips, then back at Elena. The violence in his eyes shifted into a primal panic. "Do something," he roared, dropping to his knees beside her in the mud. The mud stained his pristine suit trousers, but he didn't care. "Fix him. I need an inhaler. Does he have asthma?" Elena yelled back, not intimidated by the gun or the shouting. She was in nurse mode. "Yes." He lost it. The man turned to one of the bodyguards. "Marco." "The bag. Now." A massive bodyguard sprinted forward, handing over a small leather kit. The man's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't unzip it. "Give it to me," Elena snapped. She snatched the bag from the terrifying man's hands. She ripped it open, found the rescue inhaler, and primed it. "Okay, Leo, listen to me," she said soothingly to the semi-conscious boy. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. She administered the puff. She waited 4 seconds. The boy gasped a ragged, terrible sound, but air entered his lungs. She gave him a second puff. The blue tint began to fade from his lips. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. "Papa," the boy whispered. The man, the one who had looked ready to burn the world down seconds ago, let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He scooped the boy up, crushing him against his chest. "I've got you, Leo. I've got you." He kissed the boy's wet hair frantically. Elena sat back on her heels, the adrenaline crashing. She was soaked, shaking, and suddenly very aware that she was surrounded by 6 armed men in the middle of a deserted street. The man stood up, holding his son effortlessly. He turned his gaze to Elena. His eyes were the color of steel cold and penetrating. He looked at her cheap coat, her worn-out sneakers, her name tag that read, "Sal's Diner." "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was deep, commanding, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Elena," she stammered, scrambling to stand up. "Just Elena." He stared at her for a long moment, cataloguing every detail of her face. "You saved his life, Elena." Anyone would have done it," she said, backing away slightly. "He needs a hospital. Even with the inhaler, he needs to be monitored." "We have private doctors," the man said dismissively. He signaled to Marco. "Get her details." "No, that's okay," Elena said quickly. "I don't need anything. I just want to go home." The man paused near the car door. He looked at her one last time, an unreadable expression on his face. "Nobody saves a Moretti for free." He got into the car. The doors slammed. Within 10 seconds, the convoy sped away, vanishing into the rainy night, as if they had never been there. Elena was left standing alone in the alley, shivering with mud on her knees, and the lingering scent of expensive cologne and gunpowder in the air. 2 days later, Elena was convinced she had hallucinated the entire event. The stress of finals week and double shifts had clearly cracked her brain. No one drove around New York in convoys like that. No one carried guns in waistbands so casually. It was a fever dream, brought on by sleep deprivation. She was currently in the laundry room of her tenement building in the Bronx, wrestling with a washing machine that had eaten her quarters. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her landlord. She ignored it. She didn't have the rent money yet. She dragged her laundry basket up 4 flights of stairs to her apartment, Unit 4B. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. When she reached her door, she dropped her basket. Standing in front of her peeling green-painted door was a man. Not just any man. It was him. The bodyguard, the massive one the man in the suit had called Marco. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the entire building. He filled the narrow hallway, his bald head scraping the light fixture. "Miss Elena Russo?" he asked. His voice was like gravel grinding together. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "How do you know my name? How did you find me?" "Mr. Moretti likes to be thorough," Marco said. He stepped aside. "He is waiting for you inside." "Inside?" Elena's voice went high. "You broke into my apartment?" "Unlocked," Marco corrected. Elena pushed past him, rushing into her tiny studio apartment. It was humiliating. Her bed was unmade. There were textbooks scattered everywhere, and a half-eaten cup of instant noodles sat on the counter. Sitting on her wobbly wooden chair, looking entirely out of place, was the man from the rain. Dante Moretti. He looked different today. Dry, controlled, lethal. He wore a navy 3-piece suit, his legs crossed at the ankle. He was scanning one of her nursing textbooks, Advanced Pathophysiology. He looked up as she entered. The intensity of his gaze made the air in the room feel heavy. "You have a 4.0 GPA, he stated, closing the book. "Top of your class at NYU. But you are 3 months behind on rent, and the university bursar is about to drop you from your classes for non-payment." Elena felt a flush of anger rise up her neck, overpowering her fear. "Who do you think you are? You can't just barge in here and investigate my life. Get out." Dante stood up. He was incredibly tall. The small room suddenly felt like a cage. "I am Dante Moretti," he said, simply, as if the name explained everything. "And I am here to settle a debt." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. He tossed it onto her kitchen table. It landed with a heavy thud. $50,000, Dante said. "Cash. Consider it a thank you for saving Leo." Elena stared at the envelope. $50,000. That would pay her tuition, her rent, her debt. It would change her life. She looked at Dante. His expression was bored, transactional. He was buying her off. Elena walked over to the table, picked up the envelope, and held it out to him. "Take it," she said. Dante frowned, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his face. "It's not enough, I can double it." "I don't want your money," Elena said, her hand shaking slightly. "I helped a sick child because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted a payout from a... whatever you are." Dante's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. She could smell the crisp scent of rain and expensive tobacco. "You are foolish. You are drowning in debt, Elena. Pride is a luxury you cannot afford." "It's not pride. It's integrity," she shot back. "Now please leave." Dante studied her. For the first time, he really looked at her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the frayed cuffs of her sweater, the defiance in her chin. "Leo has not spoken since that night," Dante said quietly. The mask slipped just a fraction. "He has severe trauma. His mother died 2 years ago. Since then, he trusts no one. He has fired 5 nannies in 2 months. He screams if the doctors come near him." Elena softened slightly. "He needs therapy, Mr. Moretti. Patience." He asked for you, Dante said. The room went silent. What? He asked for the angel lady from the rain, Dante said. He says you made the air come back. Dante reached into his pocket again, but this time he didn't pull out money. He pulled out a business card. I am not offering you charity anymore, Elena. I am offering you a job. I need a live-in private nurse for Leo. Someone to monitor his asthma, manage his medications, and be there. He trusts you. Elena laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. I can't. I have school. I have my life here. I will pay off your tuition, Dante interrupted. I will provide you a suite in my penthouse at the Obsidian Tower. You will have a driver to take you to your classes, and I will pay you $10,000 a month. Elena's mouth fell open. That's insane. That is my offer, Dante said. He placed the card on the table next to the rejected envelope. You have 24 hours to decide. If you say no, I walk away and you never see us again. But Leo will continue to suffer. He walked to the door. Marco opened it for him. Before he left, Dante turned back. You saved his life, Elena. Don't abandon him now. Then he was gone. Elena stood in the silence of her apartment, staring at the card. It was black with gold embossing. Just a name and a number. Dante Moretti. She looked at her eviction notice. She looked at her textbooks. She thought of the little boy with the terrified eyes and the too big tuxedo. She picked up the phone. The Obsidian Tower didn't just pierce the Manhattan skyline. It dominated it. A monolith of black glass and steel overlooking Central Park, it was a fortress disguised as a residence. Elena sat in the back of the town car, clutching her meager belongings, 2 suitcases and a backpack filled with nursing textbooks. The leather seats were softer than her mattress at home. The driver, a silent man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, drove with a smoothness that suggested he was used to transporting fragile explosives. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, Eleanor felt the air pressure change. She stepped out into a foyer that was larger than her entire apartment building. The floors were white, marble cold, and reflective as a frozen lake. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, millions of lights twinkling below like fallen stars. But despite the opulence, the place felt dead. It was silent, sterile. There were no photos on the walls, no personal clutter, just expensive art and the hum of a high-tech climate control system. Miss Russo. Elena jumped. A woman stood by the grand staircase. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, wearing a severe grey dress. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her face was pinched with suspicion. I am Mrs. Rossi, the housekeeper, she said stiffly. Mr. Moretti is in a meeting and is not to be disturbed. I will show you to your quarters, and then to Master Leo. Elena nodded, feeling incredibly small. Thank you, Mrs. Rossi. Mrs. Rossi led her down a long corridor. Rules of the house. The woman recited, her voice monotone. Meals are at 700 a.m. and 700 p.m. sharp. You do not speak to the security detail unless necessary. You do not answer the landline. And you never under any circumstances enter the East Wing. That is Mr. Moretti's private study. Got it, Elena whispered. Her room was beautiful, a suite with a king-sized bed, a private balcony, and a bathroom stocked with products she couldn't pronounce. But she didn't have time to unpack. Take me to Leo, Elena said, setting her bag down. Mrs. Rossi hesitated, her expression softening just a fraction. He is having a difficult day. The storm last night upset him. They went to a room at the end of the hall. It was filled with toys, expensive imported toys, that looked like they had never been touched. A train set covered half the floor. But the room was empty. "Leo," Elena called out softly. There was a rustle from the walk-in closet. Elena motioned for Mrs. Rossi to stay back. She walked slowly toward the closet, crouching down. In the corner, buried under a pile of cashmere blankets, two terrified eyes peered out. Leo was clutching the inhaler she had given him that night in the rain. "Hey, Leo," Elena said, keeping her voice low and steady. "Do you remember me? I'm Elena, the lady with the water bottle." Leo blinked. He didn't move. "I heard you have a pretty cool view of the park." She continued, sitting cross-legged on the floor, ignoring the expensive dress she had bought from a thrift store for this arrival. "But it's scary when the thunder gets loud, right?" Leo nodded slowly. "I used to be scared of thunder, too." Elena lied. "Until I learned that it's just the clouds bumping into each other, like bumper cars." She held out her hand. "I'm going to be staying here for a while, to make sure you breathe easy. Is that okay?" Leo looked at her hand. Then he looked at her face. Slowly, tentatively, he crawled out from the blankets. He was small for his age, fragile. He placed his cold hand in hers. "You stayed," he whispered, his voice raspy. "I promised, didn't I?" Elena smiled. For the next 3 hours, Elena didn't act like a nurse. She acted like a human. She didn't poke or prod him. She played with the train set. She read him a story. She monitored his breathing through observation, noting the rise and fall of his chest, the color of his skin. By 9:00 p.m., Leo was asleep in his bed, actually sleeping, not just hiding. Elena stepped out of the room, leaving the door cracked open. She let out a long sigh, rubbing the back of her neck. "You have a magic touch." Elena spun around. Dante Moretti was leaning against the wall in the hallway. He had shed his suit jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink, a tattoo of a serpent wrapped around his left wrist, disappearing up his sleeve. "He was just lonely," Elena said, her heart doing a traitorous flip at the sight of him. "And scared. He hasn't slept before midnight in 2 years, Dante said. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her. He moved like a predator, silent fluid. He stopped 2 feet away. The smell of whiskey and fatigue clung to him. "Mrs. Rossi tells me you asked for the Wi-Fi password and a coffee machine for your room," Dante said. "I need to study late," Elena replied, trying to maintain eye contact. It was difficult. His eyes were mesmerizingly intense. "And I need caffeine to keep up with the 7-year-old. "Work hard, Miss Russo," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. "I pay for excellence, not for babysitting." "I'm not a babysitter. I'm a pediatric nurse trainee," Elena corrected him, lifting her chin. "And speaking of which, I need to discuss his environment. The house is too cold. The dry air triggers asthma. We need humidifiers in his room and the main living areas. And—" She hesitated. "And—" Dante raised an eyebrow. "And I saw a gun on the table in the foyer when I walked in." Elena said, her voice shaking but firm. "It was just sitting there, next to the mail." The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante's face hardened. "This is not a normal house, Elena." "He is a child," she hissed. "If he had found it, he knows better," Dante snapped. "And that gun is there because there are people who would like to walk through that door and kill everyone inside, including him." Elena took a step back, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. Who are they? Dante stepped closer, looming over her. People you never want to meet. Do your job, Elena. Keep him healthy. Leave the security to me. He turned to walk away, heading toward the forbidden East Wing. Mr. Moretti, Elena called out. He paused, not looking back. Thank you, she said softly. For the tuition. Dante stood still for a moment, the tension in his shoulders visible. Dinner is at 7, he said roughly. Don't be late. He disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, leaving Elena standing alone in the golden cage, realizing she had just challenged the most dangerous man in New York, and lived. 2 weeks passed. Life at the penthouse fell into a strange, rhythmic routine. Elena attended her classes in the morning, driven by the silent chauffeur, Marco. She studied in the afternoons while Leo had his tutors. In the evenings, she was Leo's shadow. They built Lego castles, watched cartoons, and did his breathing exercises. Leo was thriving. His color was better. His laughter, rare at first, was becoming a frequent sound in the silent halls. Dante, however, remained a ghost. She saw him at breakfast reading the Wall Street Journal, and occasionally documents stamped with confidential, and rarely at dinner. He was polite, but distant. He watched her interacting with Leo, with a look she couldn't decipher, like a man starving looking at a feast he wasn't allowed to touch. But the bubble of peace burst on a rainy Tuesday night. Elena was in the kitchen making herbal tea. It was 2:00 a.m. She had an exam on pharmacology the next day, and couldn't sleep. The penthouse was silent, the city lights below obscured by thick fog. Suddenly the elevator chimed. It wasn't the polite ding of a guest arrival. It was the emergency override alarm, a harsh, buzzing sound. The doors slid open. Marco stumbled out, half carrying Dante. Oh my God! Elena dropped her mug. It shattered on the floor, ceramic shards flying everywhere. Dante was pale, his skin grey, against the stark white of his shirt. But the shirt wasn't white anymore. The entire left side was soaked in crimson. Help me, Marco grunted, dragging Dante toward the sofa. Get the kit. No hospitals, Dante wheezed, his teeth gritted in agony. No. Cops. Elena's training kicked in. She didn't scream. She didn't ask questions. She ran to the hall closet, where she kept the advanced medical supplies Dante had allowed her to order for emergencies. She sprinted back to the living room. Marco had laid Dante on the white leather couch. The blood was spreading fast, ruining the Italian leather. Marco, hold pressure, Elena commanded, dropping to her knees. She ripped open Dante's shirt buttons, popping them off. The wound was ugly, a jagged slice across his ribs on the left side. Not a bullet, a knife. A deep slash. Who did this? Elena asked, her hands moving fast, pulling on gloves, grabbing gauze. Salvatore's men, Marco spat. Ambush at the docks. Marco, leave us, Dante gasped. Go. Secure the perimeter. Make sure they didn't follow. Boss, you're losing a lot of blood, Marco argued. Go. Dante roared, though it came out as a wet cough. Marco hesitated, looked at Elena, then nodded and ran for the elevator. Elena was alone with him. She grabbed a bottle of saline and poured it over the wound to clean it. Dante hissed his back, arching off the sofa. His hand shot out and gripped Elena's wrist hard. I need to clean it, Dante, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. It's deep. It needs stitches. Now. Dante looked up at her. His eyes were glassy with pain, his pupils blown wide. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Do it." "I don't have anesthesia," she whispered. "I only have lidocaine cream. It won't be enough for the deep tissue." "Just sew me up, Elena," he growled. "I've had worse." Elena swallowed hard. She threaded the suture needle. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled for a split second before she forced them to still. "Don't move." She drove the needle into his skin. Dante didn't scream. He just stopped breathing for a moment, his jaw clenching so hard she thought his teeth would crack. His grip on her wrist tightened, bruising her skin. But she didn't pull away. She worked quickly, efficiently. Stitch, knot, stitch, knot. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the rain against the glass and Dante's ragged breathing. Elena was so close to him, she could count his eyelashes. She could smell the metallic tang of blood mixed with his cologne, sandalwood, and musk. "Almost done," she murmured, wiping sweat from his brow with her sleeve. 2 more. When she tied the final knot and cut the thread, she slumped back, exhaling a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. "It's done," she said softly. "You lost a lot of blood, but no major arteries were hit. You're lucky." Dante let out a long breath. His grip on her wrist loosened, but he didn't let go. He slid his hand down to her palm, interlacing his fingers with hers. His hand was large, rough, and hot. "You didn't run," he said. His voice was rough, a low rumble in his chest. "I'm a nurse," Elena said, her pulse racing. "I don't run from blood." "Most people run from me when I'm bleeding," Dante said. He turned his head, looking at her. The cold steel mask was gone. In its place was something raw. Vulnerability. "You should have gone to a hospital," Elena scolded him, gently cleaning the blood from his chest with a wet cloth. She tried to ignore the hard muscles of his torso, the scars that told stories of a violent life. "I trust you more than a hospital," Dante murmured. The words hung in the air. Elena froze the cloth, hovering over his heart. She looked into his eyes. They were dark, pulling her in. "Dante," she whispered. "Who are the Salvatores?" Dante's expression darkened. He tried to sit up, wincing. Elena placed a hand on his good shoulder to steady him. "They are the past," Dante said. "A past that refuses to stay buried. They want my territory, and they know my weak spots." He looked at the hallway that led to Leo's room. "They know about Leo?" Elena asked, horror dawning on her. "They know everything," Dante said. He looked back at Elena, his gaze intense. "And now, they know about you." Elena's blood ran cold. "Me. You are living in my house. You are raising my son. To them, you are not just a nurse, Elena." Dante reached up his hand, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over her bottom lip, smearing a tiny drop of his own blood on her skin. "To them, you are mine." Elena stopped breathing. The heat from his hand seared her skin. "And because you are mine," Dante vowed, his voice a low, dangerous promise, "I will burn this city to the ground before I let them touch you." He leaned in. For a second, Elena thought he was going to kiss her. She wanted him to. God help her, she wanted the Mafia boss to kiss her. But suddenly, the elevator doors chimed again. Dante pulled away instantly, the mask slamming back into place. He reached under the sofa cushion and pulled out a gun Elena hadn't even known was there. He pointed it at the elevator. The doors opened. It was Marco. He looked grim. "Boss," Marco said, not stepping out. we have a problem. They didn't just ambush the docks." "What?" Dante snapped, trying to stand up, ignoring Elena's protests. "They hit the warehouse in Queens," Marco said, "and they left a message." "What message?" Marco swallowed. "They left a doll, a toy soldier, with its head cut off." Elena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. A threat to Leo. Dante's face went void of all emotion. It was the face of death. "Pack a bag, Elena," he ordered, his voice terrifyingly calm. "What? Where are we going?" "Not we," Dante said, looking at her with cold detachment. "You and Leo. You are leaving tonight. Marco will take you to the safe house." "And you?" Elena asked, grabbing his arm. "You're injured. You can't stay here alone." Dante looked at his bandaged side, then at Elena. He gently removed her hand from his arm. "I am not going to hide," Dante Moretti said, racking the slide of his pistol. "I am going to war." The safe house wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mid-century modern estate on the cliffs of Montauk. They called it the Iron Orchard. The drive had taken 3 hours in an armored Chevrolet Suburban. Marco drove in silence, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. Leo was curled up in the back seat, his head in Elena's lap. He had stopped crying miles ago, retreating into a silent, terrifying numbness. When they arrived, the heavy iron gates rolled open automatically. The property was surrounded by 10-foot walls, topped with razor wire, hidden by tasteful ivy. "Inside," Marco ordered, as he parked the car. "Do not go near the windows. Do not go outside. The perimeter is alarmed." Elena ushered Leo inside. The house was cold, smelling of lemon polish and disuse. "Where is my papa?" Leo asked, his voice small in the large, empty living room. Elena knelt down, unzipping his coat. "He's fixing things, Leo. He's making sure the bad men go away, so we can go home." "Is he going to die?" Leo asked. The directness of the question felt like a slap. "No," Elena said fiercely, though she didn't believe it herself. "Your papa is the toughest man I know." For 3 days they lived in a state of suspended animation. The rain continued to batter the coast, turning the ocean below the cliffs into a churning grey cauldron. Elena paced the floors. She tried to study for her exams, but the words swam on the page. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped hoping it was Dante. It never was. Marco was a constant looming presence. He paced the perimeter, talking into a satellite phone in hushed, angry tones. There were 2 other guards stationed outside Rico and Silas. They looked like statues, standing in the rain. On the 4th night, the silence broke. Elena had just put Leo to bed. She went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As she passed the library, she heard voices. The door was cracked open. "He's weak, Rico. He took a knife to the ribs. He's bleeding out in the city, while we're stuck here babysitting the nurse and the brat." Elena froze. It was Marco's voice. "Salvatore offered double," a second voice replied Rico. "Double and a seat at the table. If we hand them over, the war ends tonight. Moretti falls without his heir." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Marco wasn't the protector. He was the leak. Or at least he was considering it. The loyalty of mercenaries was only as deep as their pockets. She didn't wait to hear the rest. She took off her shoes to move silently. She sprinted back to the bedroom. "Leo," she whispered, shaking him awake. "Leo, wake up. We have to play a game." Leo rubbed his eyes, groggy. "What, the quiet game?" Elena said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "We have to hide. Right now." She didn't take any bags. She grabbed the heavy flashlight from the bedside table and Leo's inhaler. "Come on." She led him not to the door, but to the bathroom. During her pacing over the last few days, she had noticed a small maintenance hatch behind the linen closet in the bathroom. It likely led to the crawl space or the basement utilities. She pushed the linen cart aside and pried the panel open with her fingernails until they bled. "Get in," she whispered. "It's dark," Leo whimpered. "I know, but I'm right behind you." Leo crawled in. Elena squeezed in after him, pulling the panel back into place just as the bedroom door kicked open. "Elena!" Marco's voice boomed. It wasn't the polite growl of the bodyguard anymore. It was the bark of a hunter. "Check the bathroom. They can't be far." Elena pulled Leo deeper into the crawl space. It was tight, filled with insulation and pipes. They crawled over rough wooden beams. Below them she could hear heavy boots stomping on the hardwood floors. "They're gone," Rico shouted. "Window is locked. How did they get out?" "Find them," Marco roared. "Salvatore is 10 minutes away. I want them tied up and ready for delivery." Elena's breath hitched. "Salvatore is coming here." She dragged Leo toward where she thought the garage was. If she could get to the Suburban. But no Marco would have the keys. They reached a ventilation grate that looked down into the kitchen. Elena peered through the slats. Marco was standing by the island, loading a fresh magazine into an assault rifle. He looked calm, methodical. The man who had driven her to school, who had carried Dante when he was bleeding, he was selling them to the butchers. "Check the basement," Marco commanded into his radio. Elena knew they were trapped. The crawl space ended at the exterior wall. There was no way out, except back into the house. She looked at Leo. He was shaking, tears streaming down his face, but he was holding his breath, terrified into silence. Elena made a decision. She wasn't going to die cowering in a wall. "Leo," she whispered, putting her mouth right against his ear. "Listen to me. I'm going to go down there and make a distraction. When I scream, you kick that vent open and you run. You run into the woods, and you don't stop until you find a road. Do you understand?" "No." Leo clung to her. "No, Elena. You have to," she said, tears spilling over. "You have to live. For your papa." She kissed his forehead. Then she crawled back toward the bathroom access point. She kicked the panel open and tumbled out into the bathroom. She didn't try to hide. She grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from the hallway console table and threw it through the window. Crash! The sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. "Bedroom." "They're in the bedroom," Rico shouted from the hallway. Elena sprinted not toward the bedroom but toward the kitchen. She needed a weapon, a knife, anything. She burst into the kitchen. Marco spun around, the rifle raising. Elena didn't stop. She slid across the floor in her socks, grabbing a butcher block of knives and hurling the entire thing at him. Marco swatted it away like it was a fly, the heavy wood clattering to the floor. He lunged forward, grabbing Elena by the throat and lifting her off the ground. "Where is the boy?" He hissed, his face inches from hers. Elena clawed at his hands, her vision spotting. "Go to hell. Suit yourself." Marco tightened his grip. Suddenly the front door of the house exploded inward. It wasn't a kick. It was a breech charge. The heavy oak doors were blown off their hinges, splintering into 1,000 pieces. Smoke filled the foyer. Marco dropped Elena, spinning toward the door, raising his rifle. Through the smoke, a figure walked in. He wasn't running. He was limping heavily. He wore a tattered, blood-stained white shirt and black trousers. In his right hand, he held a gold-plated desert eagle. It was Dante. But it wasn't the Dante she knew. This was the monster the city feared. His face was a mask of pure, concentrated rage. "Marco!" Dante's voice was a low thunderclap that shook the walls. Marco hesitated. For a split second, fear flickered in his eyes. "Boss, They made me an offer." "You sold my son," Dante said. He didn't shout. The quietness was worse. Marco raised his rifle. Dante didn't flinch. He raised his pistol and fired once. The shot was deafening. Marco's rifle clattered to the floor. He looked down at the hole in his chest with surprise, then collapsed backward, dead before he hit the ground. Dante didn't check the body. He scanned the room wild-eyed until he saw Elena gasping on the floor. "Leo!" he demanded, rushing to her, falling to his knees. The movement made him grunt in pain, fresh blood seeping through his shirt. "Crawl space," Elena wheezed, pointing up. "He's safe." Dante closed his eyes for a second, a silent prayer moving his lips. Then he looked at Elena. He reached out and touched the red marks already forming on her neck. "I'm sorry," he rasped. "I'm so sorry." "Salvatore," Elena choked out. "They said 10 minutes. Dante looked at his watch. He reloaded his gun with a terrifying click-clack. "No," Dante said, standing up and pulling Elena to her feet. "They are already here." Headlights flooded the windows, dozens of them. The house was surrounded. The siege of the Iron Orchard lasted less than 3 minutes. There were simply too many of them. Dante fought like a demon. He took out 3 men who breached the kitchen window, his aim supernatural, even while he was swaying from blood loss. Elena stayed low, arming herself with the fallen butcher knife, ready to fight for her life. But then came the voice over the megaphone. "Dante, we have the gas. Come out, or we burn the rat out of the walls." Dante froze. He looked at the ceiling where Leo was hiding. If they gassed the house, Leo's asthma would kill him before the smoke did. Dante looked at Elena. His eyes were tragic. "I can't let him die." "Don't do it," Elena begged. "They'll kill you." "They want me," Dante said. He dropped his gun. He held his hands up. "Stay here. Stay hidden." He walked out the front door. Elena watched from the shattered window, tears blurring her vision as men in tactical gear swarmed him. They beat him to the ground with rifle butts. They zip-tied his hands. Then they stormed the house. Elena tried to fight, swinging the knife, but a soldier backhanded her across the face. The world went black. She woke up to the smell of rust and low tide. She was tied to a chair. Her head was pounding. She blinked her eyes open, trying to focus. She was in a warehouse, cavernous, with water dripping from the corrugated metal roof. In the center of the room, under a single harsh spotlight, was Dante. He was tied to a steel pillar. He looked broken. His shirt was gone, revealing the stitched wound Elena had treated, which had torn open again. His face was swollen, one eye shut. And sitting on a velvet chair in front of him, looking pristine in a white suit, was a man eating an apple. Vincent, the Viper Salvatore. "Wakey, wakey, nurse," Vincent called out, tossing the apple core onto the floor. Elena struggled against the ropes. "Where is Leo?" "The boy is fine," Vincent said, gesturing to a glass office overlooking the warehouse floor. Elena squinted. She could see Leo sitting in a chair, a guard standing behind him. He looked terrified, but unharmed. "For now," Vincent added. He stood up and walked over to Dante. He poked Dante's open wound with a manicured finger. Dante groaned, his head lolling forward. "The great Dante Moretti," Vincent sneered. "Captured because he got soft, because he fell in love with a waitress and played house." Dante lifted his head. Blood dripped from his chin. "Let them go, Vinny. This is between us." "It is," Vincent agreed, "but I want you to suffer first. I want you to watch." Vincent snapped his fingers. 2 guards grabbed Elena's chair and dragged her into the center of the circle, placing her right next to Dante. "Here is the deal," Vincent said, pulling a gold revolver from his jacket. "You sign over the shipping territories, you sign over the unions, and you admit on camera that the Moretti family is finished." "And if I don't?" Dante rasped. Vincent pointed the gun at Elena's temple. The metal was cold against her skin. "Then I paint the floor with her brains. And then I go upstairs and toss the boy off the catwalk." Dante strained against his bonds, the veins in his neck bulging. "I'll kill you. I will rip your throat out with my teeth." "Sign the papers, Dante," Vincent said, cocking the hammer. Click. Dante looked at Elena. His one good eye was filled with agony. He was defeated. For the first time in his life, the King of New York was beaten. "Okay," Dante whispered. "Okay. I'll sign." Vincent laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "Good boy." He signaled a lawyer standing in the shadows. The man scurried forward with a clipboard. Elena looked at Dante. He was staring at the floor, his spirit broken. But then she saw it. Vincent was shaking. Not from fear, from illness. His hand, holding the gun, had a rhythmic tremor. His pupils were pinned. Opioids, Elena realized. "He's high." She looked at the guard standing next to her. He was watching Vincent, not her. He had a knife sheathed at his belt. The lawyer held the clipboard for Dante. Vincent lowered the gun, slightly distracted by his victory. "Untie his hand so he can sign," Vincent ordered the guard. The guard stepped forward and cut the zip tie on Dante's right hand. Dante took the pen. His hand was shaking. "Dante," Elena said, her voice clear and sharp. Dante looked at her. "Breathe," she said. It was the command she used for Leo during an attack. But she put a specific emphasis on it. She looked at Vincent, then at the flickering light above his head, then back at Dante. 1, 2, 3. Dante understood. He didn't sign. He jammed the pen into the lawyer's eye. The lawyer screamed, dropping the clipboard. In the confusion, Dante grabbed the guard's knife from his belt and slashed the man's throat in one fluid motion. "Kill him!" Vincent screamed, firing the revolver blindly. The bullet grazed Dante's shoulder, but the adrenaline had taken over. Dante wasn't a man anymore. He was a machine of violence. He lunged at Vincent, tackling him to the ground. The other guards raised their rifles, but they couldn't shoot without hitting their boss. "Elena, get down!" Dante roared, pummeling Vincent's face with his fists. Elena didn't get down. She saw the guard who had been guarding her fumble for his backup weapon. She threw herself backward, chair and all slamming into his knees. He buckled. Gunfire erupted. Dante rolled off Vincent, grabbing the gold revolver. He fired 3 shots. 2 guards dropped. He sprinted toward Elena, cutting her ropes with the stolen knife. "Get Leo!" he shouted, pushing her toward the stairs. "Go! Not without you. I'm right behind you." Elena scrambled up the metal stairs toward the glass office. The guard up there was aiming his rifle down at Dante. "Hey!" Elena screamed. The guard turned. Elena picked up a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the guard's helmet, with a sickening clang. He crumpled. Elena kicked the door open. "Leo!" Leo jumped into her arms. "Elena, we have to go, baby. Hold on tight." She looked down at the warehouse floor. It was a war zone. Dante was behind a crate pinned down by fire from 3 remaining guards. Vincent was crawling toward a dropped submachine gun. Dante was out of bullets. He clicked the revolver. Empty. He looked up at the office. He saw Elena and Leo safe. He smiled a sour, bloody smile. He wasn't coming up. He was going to draw their fire so they could escape out the back catwalk. "No," Elena whispered. She saw Vincent pick up the gun. He aimed it at Dante's exposed back. Elena didn't think. She looked at the guard she had knocked out. He had a pistol in his holster. She had never fired a gun in her life. But she knew anatomy. She knew where the heart was. She knew where the spine was. She grabbed the gun. She rested it on the railing. She took a breath. 1, 2, 3. She pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, hitting a steam pipe. But it distracted Vincent. He looked up. That 1 second was all Dante needed. He vaulted over the crate, a knife in his hand. He covered the distance to Vincent in 2 strides. Vincent turned, eyes wide. Dante didn't hesitate. He drove the knife into Vincent's chest. The warehouse went silent. The remaining guards, seeing their boss dead, lowered their weapons. In the Mafia world, when the king kills the usurper, the war is over. Dante stood up, panting, covered in blood. He looked up at the balcony. He looked at Elena. She was holding the smoking gun, her hands trembling. He walked to the stairs, step by step, painfully slow. When he reached the top, he didn't say a word. He collapsed to his knees and pulled both Elena and Leo into his arms. They stayed like that, a bloody, broken family, huddled on the metal grate, while the sirens of police cars, finally called by the neighbors, began to wail in the distance. The interrogation room at the 10th precinct smelled of stale coffee and intimidation. Detective Miller slammed a file onto the metal table, leaning in close to Elena. "Look, Miss Russo." Miller sighed, exhausted. "We found gunshot residue on your hands. We know you pulled the trigger. Just go on record saying Dante Moretti forced you to do it. You walk, he goes to Rikers for life. Clean break." Elena looked at the 2-way mirror. She knew Dante was in the next room, likely battered and bleeding, refusing to say a word. "He didn't force me," Elena said softly, her voice steady. "He saved my life, and I saved his. That's all you need to know." Miller opened his mouth to argue, but the door flew open. The most expensive defense attorney in Manhattan strode in, looking impeccable in a pinstripe suit. "Detective," Thorne said, his voice smooth as silk. "My client has provided security footage from the warehouse. It clearly shows Vincent Salvatore initiating lethal violence against a child. Miss Russo acted in defense of a minor against an active shooter. Unless you want to charge a pediatric nurse for saving a 7-year-old boy, I suggest you let her walk." Miller ground his teeth, glared at Elena, and slammed the file shut. "Get her out of here." Elena stepped out of the precinct into a blinding frenzy of paparazzi flashbulbs. A black SUV screeched to the curb, the back door flying open. It wasn't a driver inside. It was Dante. He looked terrible, his face bruised, arm in a sling, but his eyes were alert. "Get in," he commanded. They sped away, leaving the chaos behind, heading straight for a private airstrip in Teterboro. A sleek jet was already waiting on the tarmac, engines whining. "Where is Leo?" Eleanor asked, her heart racing. On board, Dante said, turning to her. He's going to my estate in Tuscany. It's a fortress. He'll be safe there. And you, I have to stay, Dante replied grimly. The war is over, but the city is in chaos. I have to secure the territory. If I leave now, everything falls apart. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a blank check. Fill it out. Any amount. Go finish your degree in Paris or London. Just go somewhere safe. Being near me, it almost got you killed. Elena looked at the check, then at the lonely figure of Leo waving from the jet window. She took the check, ripped it in half, and let the pieces flutter to the floor of the car. You still owe me for the overtime, she said defiantly. Dante stared at her, his composure cracking. Elena, be reasonable. I am a dangerous man. I know, she whispered, reaching out to touch the bandage on his cheek. But you need someone to stitch you up when the world tears you apart. And Leo needs a mother, not just a bodyguard. Dante closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers, surrendering. I cannot promise you safety. I don't want safe, she said. I want you. He kissed her, then a desperate, searing seal of a promise. Go to Italy, he whispered against her lips. Wait for me. I will clean these streets, and when I come for you, I will never let you go again. 1 year later, the Tuscan hills glowed gold in the late afternoon sun. The air smelled of crushed grapes and heated earth. Elena sat on the stone terrace of the villa, a medical journal in her lap. Mama. Look. Leo ran across the lawn, chasing a golden retriever puppy. He was taller, his cheeks rosy with health. He hadn't touched his inhaler in months. A shadow fell over Eleanor. She looked up to see a man standing at the edge of the terrace. He wore linen trousers and a white shirt, the lines of stress and violence erased from his face. Dante. He walked toward her and knelt on the stone floor, pulling a velvet box from his pocket. Inside sat a diamond cut like a saw-set in a band of interwoven gold and steel. You saved my son in the rain, Dante said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved my soul in the dark. Will you rule this life with me, Elena, not as a nurse, not as a debt, but as my wife? Elena looked at Leo playing in the grass, then at the man who had burned down his own kingdom to come back to her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Dante. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her as the sun dipped below the horizon. The newspapers in New York called it a crime saga. But here, under the Italian sky, Elena knew the truth. It was just a love story. A boy in the rain, a man in the shadows, and the woman who loved them both enough to brave the storm. And that is the incredible finale of Elena and Dante's story. From the stormy streets of Hell's Kitchen to the golden vineyards of Italy, they proved that love is the only force strong enough to conquer a world of violence. Elena didn't just save a boy's life, she healed a father's broken soul. What did you think of the ending? Do you think Dante made the right choice leaving the city behind? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this series, please hit that like button. It helps us create more long-form stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next series, a psychological thriller that starts next week. Thanks for watching.